Hello, hello, hello. I'm gonna take this from Emily. Clap once if you can hear me. Clap twice if you can hear me. Clap 3 times if you can hear me. I feel like a school teacher and I love it. I hope everybody enjoyed that quick break. As a reminder, this is our final session. After this session, it is time for the after party. And so we're gonna go ahead and get started. We're extremely excited about this next panel. It is truly the nexus of why we brought you all here today. It is a conversation about the evolution of bringing people together around movement, literally and figuratively. We know that creating a thriving and active community requires a deep understanding of the diverse needs and aspirations of the people who inhabit and shape these spaces. We've heard this through many of the conversations today. Most of the powerful communities come together, and in this session, you will meet 3 incredible thought leaders. Without further ado, I'm going to welcome to the stage Rich Roll.
Thanks, man. How are you? Thank you. Hey, everybody. Last session of the day. What an incredible experience I know I'm having, I'm sure all of you are having, around our shared love for the outdoors, for movement and community, of course. This is community in action. And there's been a lot of discussion about community today. And I'm remembering something that Charlie Dark said earlier about the commodification of community. Community obviously is going to be defined differently depending upon your point of view, your background, where you come from. But I think we could probably all agree that there has been a little co-opting, commercialization, and commodification around this term community. But real community is real. This is real community in action. And today, I'm just honored and delighted to have a panel of extraordinary individuals who are absolute professionals at creating, cultivating, developing, growing, building real community. So I want to open it up with that question, like how do you define, think about, and grow community in your respective worlds? How do you build movements out of movements? So Carol, let's start with you. What you're doing in women's sports is just incredibly inspirational.
Thank you. I'm looking at all these headshots and feeling like I've got the least cool one here. So, I'm the co-founder of Angels City Football Club, which is invite you all to come to a game. I can only comp a couple of you, but I invite you all to come. Which is the first majority female-owned, female-led professional sports team in the country. And I'll start there because, I think when we started it, what we started doing was reading every book we could read about sports communities. And as you guys know, you can't really build a community from books, but it was pretty interesting to read the Sounders books and the Barcelona books and really understand kind of the communities in particular that grew out of football culture or soccer culture. And for us, I think I kind of started it in 2015. Basically after I left the Women's World Cup as just a fan. And I felt that community joy in the air. I'd been a working mom, heads down for 10 years, and I think I honestly hadn't had fun in 10 years. And not that not having kids isn't really fun, it is really fun. But the way I describe the way I felt in that stadium is the way I hope you would feel if you come to Angel City, which is I just felt 12 again. I felt like this joyful 12-year-old. And I felt like those stands felt like more like society than a lot of the ways I'd felt at other sporting events. And then yet I couldn't replicate that. It was only happening once every 4 years. I couldn't find jerseys to buy. I couldn't find content to watch. I couldn't follow these players. I did have Instagram, and that was where I found community, strangely enough. And so, to fast forward it to where we are now, the way Angel City was this journey through activism and spending time just trying to support the U.S. national team in their pay equity fight and not starting by thinking I would start a team. And it was just following my own joy and my own community. And it started for me with Natalie Portman and I becoming friends through trying to support the U.S. national team and looking at each other one day and saying, why don't we start a team? And then ultimately, when we formally started the team, one of the first things we did was start with our first community member. And it's a person who was waving a flag at the LAFC game that said, "Bring the NWSL to LA." Their name, it was a husband and wife kind of unit, and their name are the Rojas's, and they anchored our first supporters group. And I could go into a lot more detail around how we built that out, but that was and is the heart and soul of what makes Angel City, Angel City. And if any of you guys have been to the stadium, our supporters are in a special section. The way they're organized, the way we honor them, the way we handle conflict, when we get things wrong, the way they hold us accountable is huge, and we don't take that for granted. And we actually just had a documentary come out last night where they're interviewed, and it was the part of the documentary my husband said to me, he's like, "Do you realize how special this is?" Because they were weeping on screen, and then we were weeping, and that's the stuff, the stuff you don't necessarily pay for that makes you feel human.
That's really beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Turning it to coffee, absolute legend for having one name. Right? It's one thing to have an idea, to share that idea, to create coalition around a shared idea. It's another thing to turn a shared idea into activism or advocacy. And then it's another thing altogether to turn that into change, right? So talk a little bit about community from your perspective, what you do, and how you think about activism with movement.
So for me, I'm based in Brooklyn, New York, so all the 5 boroughs there. But for me, I've been running for 18 years now, like long distance, but I didn't really get serious until like 2013. And I was paying attention to detail. Like I was a hardcore treadmill runner. You couldn't get me outside. No, I don't need people. I can run by myself. And then I finally went outside and realized that I no longer can run on the treadmill, because running with people actually made 7 miles seem like 1 mile. And then I fell in love with it. And then what I was noticing though was that throughout the years, there was a lot of things that was happening and transpiring within run culture, as well as everything else, but no one wanted to talk about it. And I'm from the South, born and raised in a small town called Aurora, North Carolina, where racism still today exists heavily. But the crazy thing is that the population there is only 520 people, and it's still just dirt roads, no stop signs, no stop lights. Like you'll never hear us on the map because of those things. And I'm here in New York thinking, coming from a different perspective, but I noticed while I'm running outside, I'm getting stopped a lot when I'm in different neighborhoods. And yes, I understand that it's nighttime, but New York City is supposed to be like a 24/7, it's open all day. That's how they ran New York City. And I'm getting stopped, and I'm telling people, I got stopped last night, and they not believing it. And, and so I was like, okay, I understand, I get it. It could be deep. It could be too harsh for them. They don't believe it. Okay, I keep it to myself. And then, fast forward to everything that I heard the panelists speak about earlier, Mr. Ahmaud Arbery, Mr. Trayvon Martin, Ms. Breonna Taylor, and Mr. George Floyd. We know about all of those things that transpired. And once it came to the pandemic hit, I knew about what happened to Mr. Ahmaud Arbery in February, but the running world didn't know that. As a matter of fact, when it happened, what they're not going to tell you is that when it happened, there was a huge track meet in Atlanta that exact same time. But the media was not even talking about it. It took for the pandemic, rest in peace to everyone that passed away, because I have loved ones that passed away during it. If it wasn't for the pandemic, they would not have rewind the hands of time to go back to what happened to Mr. Ahmaud Arbery and Ms. Breonna Taylor. It took for us to be glued into our houses to see what happened to Mr. George Floyd at the same time, because we was all in our house told not to go outside because you had a curfew. And so during that time, that's when I came up with the idea of, what if I start something called Running to Protest? And although it's a pandemic, all these runners, we're glued inside. We haven't seen each other in a minute. So I put a flyer out, and the next thing you know, the flyer immediately took off, and the cops called the park commissioner, and the park commissioner called me. But what they didn't know was that the park commissioner said, Coffee, you can use any park in New York City. They was trying to get him to stop what I was trying to create, to bring attention now to everything that we was already talking about and every reason why we was already protesting way before we were even born to life. So when I put it out, thousands of people showed up, and we literally, it's a perfect metaphor, right? Because we really do run the streets in New York. We don't have that many trails, dirt roads. Like, we really on the street, so we know a dead end here and a dead end there. And 1,000 people showed up, and we was fighting for everything. Obviously, Black Lives Matter is the number one thing that we was out there for, because we're always overlooked. What America don't understand is that the hardest job in America and in the world is being black. When we say that, a lot of people don't understand that. That strictly and simply means the minute that I step outside my door, I'm a target. I can be the most innocent person. I can be the smartest person. I can be the most fashionable person. But because of the color of my skin, I can also be the person that you see on news later on, and then the cops get away with whatever they did. And that's how and why running the protest is there. And it's more so for us to fight for justice, but fight for justice for all, not just for one. Because at the same time, we all bleed the color red. Doesn't matter what your ethnicity is. We all bleed the color red. And while I'm here, I'm just trying to get along with each and everybody. Mm-hmm. And that's it. And that's the job for running the protest. And we do it every third Sunday of the month. And so far, of course, it's been, like I said, Black Lives Matter, missing and murder indigenous women, because a lot of people don't pay attention to that. Asian hate, we call that, Black and Asian solidarity, and 3,000 people showed up to that. We go all across the board just to make sure that we can bring some type of light to these situations, because now even the media today is told not to cover anything that seems similar to what happened in 2020 because it was too much for them. Mm. So a week ago in New York, this ex-Marine choked a 30-year-old Black performer to death on the train in front of all these people, and nobody saw it. I mean, nobody said anything about it. Nobody tried to stop him. But this performer was really helping New York because he was a Michael Jackson impersonator, and it just so happened that he was homeless and he was hungry, and he got on the train and he screamed that he was hungry, and right then and there, this Marine, this white male, jumped up, put him in a chokehold, and he died right there in all these people's faces. Nobody cared. New York failed that man, because this is a Black man, again, that got murdered from the hands of a white male in front of everyone, and they still trying to debate who was in the right, who was in the wrong.
What is it that makes what you do, your form of activism and protest, different is the running piece, right? So you could have just organized marches and had a more kind of traditional civil rights, style of protest. So, before I pass it over to Jeremy, I want to hear a little bit more about how running makes it different, or the role that running specifically plays into the power of the movement that you're creating.
Well, for me, running is just covering ground. You're covering more ground than when you're actually walking. And then when people are actually looking, they saying, well, what are they doing? And then they invest in their time to see, well, hold up, they're running and they protesting at the same time. But then again, what are they protesting about? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times, everything that we protest about, again, as I just mentioned, is very important that we get that message across. I'm not caring on what culture or what ethnicity you are. Just understand that what we're fighting for is real, and the message across the board is just come and share these miles with us. And we only do a 5K. And the whole purpose of just doing the 5K is just so, a lot of people that never ran before has joined, and they have tried to run. And while we out there, we just go in these neighborhoods that we know are in favor, and I'm not trying to get into politics, but it plays a part, right? We know that these neighborhoods favor Trump, and we exactly know what Trump stands for in America. Like for me, my opinion, that the American flag does not represent Black America. It's impossible for it to look. Francis Scott Key wrote the Star Spangled Banner. That third verse, he talks about how he had slaves. So when you sing that song, That song is very, very disrespectful towards Black America, but then we get in trouble for not standing up, putting our hands on our heart. I was told at a very young age from my grandfather, look, don't ever stand up for that when they play it in school, because they used to play it on the square TV, and he'll take the heat for it. And he took the heat for it every single time, because he understood. I didn't understand as a kid, but I grew up into it. Mm-hmm. So I hope
raised in the language and spirit of protest as a young person. So it's
like
part of
all the lessons that I didn't get in school, I got from my grandparents. Mm-hmm. We couldn't go any deeper than Martin Luther King Jr. They didn't like to talk about Malcolm X, an eye for an eye.
Mm-hmm. We all bleed red, but we also all live on the tiny blue dot, right? And this is kind of part of your advocacy, Jeremy. Talk a little bit about the transition from just being an epic shredder and incredible athlete and snowboarder into this kind of epiphany around climate change and this call to action to do something about it and create change.
Yeah, so I fell in love with the mountains at an early age and overcame my life, and in doing so, I set out to find these beautiful mountains and snowboard back down. And to do that safely, you got to have a really intimate relationship with the mountains. And I started seeing changes to it. And I was, 25 or so, and definitely not looking to start an organization. But I was endorsing a ton of products, and I just wanted to write a check to some group on climate change, and I actually was a member of the Surfrider Foundation at that point, and I called a friend there and said, hey, where do I send my climate change check? And he came back a week later, and he's like, you got to start an organization. And I'm like, I do not want to do that. Barely graduated high school, but I did understand the inner workings of the outdoors, specifically the ski and snow community. And I remember it was kind of probably the final thing that got me over the hump is I was walking this resort in northern Canada. It was February, it was all grass, and these guys are in their early 30s. They're showing me the warming hut, and they had tell me about how good the cookies used to be and all that stuff. And I'm like, well, why isn't it open anymore? And they said, well, it doesn't snow here anymore. And I was like, wow, you guys are not that old to lose your playground, and just realized, started thinking about climate on a 30-year scale. And finally, I got over my issues. At that point, I was using helicopters to access the mountains and had a very large footprint, but I realized that we needed to do something. And I really, I think what got me over the hump is I remember writing on a piece of paper, together we can protect our winters. And I never thought about it as this Jeremy Jones organization, and thankfully it certainly is not. It's taken on its own life form. And I just think about it as I threw a seed in the ground and tried to rally as much people around that to water that seed. And today we're a global organization with the goal to unite what we call the outdoor state, this outdoor community and economy that revolves around clean air, clean water, to come together on climate action.
Beautiful. There's a shared kind of sensibility between the three of you that you've all identified a problem, set about solving it, and are in the midst of solving a problem that perhaps will take you could commit your entire life to. A lot of people are able to see problems out there and talk about changing them or doing something. Maybe you do something, maybe you don't. But all of you have demonstrated follow through. Like, what is the secret ingredient or the key when you're approaching a huge problem to make a real kind of imprint on change? Like, what is it that distinguishes you from other people who try and fail? Like, what keeps you in the game and what keeps you energized and really kind of creates the momentum that all of you have?
I mean, first of all, I think one thing that's just I love when I'm on panels where I get so into my co-panelist story that I forget I have to speak. So
Agreed.
I think one thing that's common amongst our three stories is none of us seemed like we were overtly or intentionally looking for what kind of bit us or grabbed us. And, for me, I was in tech and media my whole career, and I sort of was uncomfortable calling myself an activist, even though I've done gender equity activism work since I basically, was marching in high school for choice and things of that nature, and definitely professionally throughout my career where there were like 2 women in any room, if you were lucky, in finance. And so I think it goes into your question in that, and now it's my whole life. I left my big fancy job. I'm 100%, I'm trying to create another big fancy job, but I'm 100% committed to investing in women's sports teams, leagues, and doing it in a way where you can really, think about how do you authentically build these businesses, these teams as like community and cultural institutions, which I think comes from understanding when you're showing up as a human and when you're putting mission first, and then when you're moving over and bringing finance in. And so it's a little bit like to your question, I just think it's really important to know when to dream and when to act and be intentional moving between the two. And what I encourage a lot of people in my life now to do, because I feel like I found the 12 out of 10 on the purpose front. I think we can all market ourselves we're at that, but most of us, including me, spend our lives at much less than that. And it's hard to make the choices to go after that 12 out of 10. But I think it really is letting things take more time and be hobbies and be things that surprise us, and where you can truly, we're in LA, so I get to talk about energy today, where you can truly follow your energy and your friendships and your joy to figure out, to let something not need to be a thing right away. And then, as soon as you think it could be a thing, get really serious about it and get really intentional. And then really know your own strengths and weaknesses. So for me, I was working on really the pay equity fight with the U.S. women's national team for a while before it was even a remote dream that I would start a soccer team. I thought you had to be very old and have $1 billion in the bank account to do that. And it was my friendship with Natalie Portman, who was my co-founder, who I brought into this pay equity fight, who had a much bigger Instagram following and friends with much bigger Instagram followings than I did, who one day said to me, let's start a team. I think that's a better way to get the world to pay attention. And then I tried to get men's teams to start the team. And when I couldn't do that, I got really serious about, what do I need to start a team? She said, don't you know how to do that? Like find money, I'm like, yeah, but you need a stadium and a monopolistic license. Those things you don't usually need. And so I think it was really then getting very serious and flipping my business hat on around, how do you get this done? What are the biggest gating items? What needs to be done that I can't do? What is Natalie good at? What am I good at? And then what's the missing piece? And that's when I recruited our third co-founder in, and then really putting a short period of time around it to make it happen. And then I think sometimes you have to give up on it and then come back to it. So anyway, that's my story, but I would say the short summary is let yourself dream and don't let everything need to be a thing right away, but then get really intentional about how you bring something to life with other people or you're on your own.
Yeah, I think that's very well said. There is this pressure that you're supposed to know your passion and that your passion and your vocation should line up perfectly. But the idea that you can have it as a hobby or a side thing while you're paying the bills another way and allow it to simmer and kind of ride that energy and follow it in the direction that ultimately, it can lead you is a really cool thing. And as the story goes, as I understand it, Natalie Portman had to text you a lot, keep saying, are we going to start a team? We got to start a team. And you were very resistant to it. It wasn't like you were on board immediately with that idea.
I was like, why does she keep saying this to me? This is so bizarre. And the text message, we actually had a documentary come out, or docuseries come out on HBO last night, so that's my shout out to go watch the Angel Cities docuseries. But yeah, I would write her these long text messages where I looked deeply like a socialist, if you were to read them, not like a capitalist looking to start a sports team. And I do come from a long line of socialists. They're still very confused by me.
Socialist venture capitalist.
I know. I mean, I sort of like, I sort of feel like in a room of capitalists, I'm a socialist. In a room of socialists, I'm a capitalist. But anyway, yeah, she said it a few different times, and then I realized she was serious. And I was sitting next to my husband, who is an Iron Man and on Strava, and like he's the one who gives me the most street cred probably in this room. And I said, look at this thing. And he said, yeah, And so anyway, that was the start of it. But I think the thing I would say is I'm usually the Natalie Portman in a conversation. Like I usually dream irrationally big, and then I have somebody pull me down to earth. And even for someone like me, it required, the Queen of Star Wars or first female Thor to put the idea in my head. And so I think that's why we need community around us, even in a small sense, to launch, to find our life's work, to launch it. And this, for me at least, this idea of that we can do things, like I get much more joy in partnership with others, because even if we have the same skill sets, which we don't, but even if you do, I think there's a psychology to these kind of movements and this joy. And I think the main thing we did well was one of us was up when the other one was down. I like to say, because we got so many no's trying to raise money for a women's soccer team, and we raised our first $1 million. We closed it like a couple weeks before COVID, and if we hadn't done that, I probably wouldn't be sitting here. And I'm guessing a lot of you guys know the stats around this, but we have more revenue than many of the men's teams. We're selling out stadiums. We have more season ticket holders than the Kings or the Clippers, and it still blows my mind.
Super powerful. Movements need leaders. You talked a little bit about shifting leadership and growing this thing that's bigger than the sum of all of these amazing parts. I'm curious, Coffee, how that works for you. Like, you are at the kind of pointy edge of this thing that you're doing. You are a leader of your community, and yet it's the community that has to transcend the personality at the forefront. So how do you think about that in terms of building community?
Whoever attends. You can't force anyone. I try my best to stay away from the leader name, activist name, organizer name. It's just something that Coffee is putting together. Reasons being that Black America saw Martin Luther King Jr. get murdered, Malcolm X get murdered, and so on. And they was known to be activists fighting for us, or leaders within the community, or leaders of Black America, period. I'm nowhere near that stage, but I'm just saying, as a kid growing up and hearing those things, because obviously that happened before we were born, or some of us were born, we was told and taught that through school, more so through your parents, depending on whatever type of education that you got as a kid. And we put on these things, and when people show up, if it's 1,000+ people, as the person in the forefront, I have a team of 26 people, and we try our best to make sure that we organize them in a certain way where they understand the message, but we also invite, someone like who is on the panel now of their stature to talk about what they see and how can they help or fix the issue. And majority of the time, obviously it's through conversation, but it's really more so through action. Now, it was hot in 2020 and 2021. 2022 and 2023, it's not hot anymore, but we still getting killed. We still getting murdered. And we're still, when I say we running the protest, we're still running to try to bring the message in and get it across these people, because it's not hot to you anymore. We're still the ones that's on the back end. And we tired of it. I have 3 young kids, man. I have a 12-year-old daughter and a set of twins who are afraid to go outside and go to school because they saw, they see all these things. You have to be blunt with everything that's happening. I can't talk to my kid about what you're gonna be when you grow up. My conversation in all seriousness with my kid is, this is what you have to do. This is how you have to shake and move in order to grow up. That's not a joke for me, man. It's not a joke for us, period. So running is the healthy tool that helped me gather all these people and our allies to come and say, hey, I'm in the struggle with you. What can I do? And I don't ever feel like anyone is overstepping their boundaries when they want to come and help. But when it goes in one ear right out the other, then obviously you blind. And we can have a blunt, I'm very blunt, as you see. I'm very blunt, I'm straightforward. I have no reason to sugarcoat anything. You either like me or you don't. That's just me, that's my personality. Because if I live and tell a lie, and I tell you, oh yeah, that's cool, and you expect for me to do A, B, and C, and I don't live up to it, then you think that I'm as fake as ever. But at the same time, if I talk about something and I don't follow through, then what are my ingredients as a black man, and what are my ingredients as a parent? So I'm sticking just like glue to everything that I say.
Yeah. Stickiness. How do you maintain momentum, attention, and continue to build the movement as the news cycle moves on to something else, right? Which was talked about earlier, is obviously applicable in the conversation around climate change as well. It's great when it's suddenly commercially or politically expedient or opportunistic for a corporate partner to step in so they can look good, to collaborate with you. But how do you transcend that and create something meaningful with a more kind of even-keeled level of support? And how do you storytell in order to keep the doors open for new people, the next generation, to get involved with this movement that you have pioneered?
Yeah, I mean, for us, when I started it right away, I just had to be vulnerable and ask these scientists. I'd read something, I'm a climate scientist or what have you, and say, I need your help. Do you want to be a part of this? And in doing so, it's been the scientists that, when we first started out, it was talking about changing a light bulb and things of that manner. And the scientists came along and said, look, we need policy to get the CO2 reduction that is needed. So that unfortunately has put us in the wonderful world of politics, where we recognize that we need to have climate champions in office, and Protect Our Winters specifically focuses on what we would call purple outdoor states, that where a couple thousand votes can make a difference in having a climate champion or not. And an example would be this IRA that passed, the Inflation Reduction Act, that at Protect Our Winters we call the Big Fucking Deal Act. It's not perfect, but it's the biggest climate policy that's ever been passed. And if you go district to district, and I was up at this last election, I was in western Colorado, in where a couple hundred votes leads to a congressman getting elected that we needed for that vote, and the margins are so small on that stuff, but to get those votes, we use storytelling, and climate's can be a tough story to tell. I've never heard a scientist say the issue's not as big as we thought it was, but we do try to enable content creators and tell them what our challenges are, and have them come to the table. And then in Nevada, for example, we had the Stoke Fest, which looked like your traditional, say, my brothers have Teton Gravity Research, like your traditional action sports film tour, but we hijacked the audience, and with these outdoor sports with a message on climate, we bring a scientist on stage. We'll have a panel discussion in between the films. It's at a very party atmosphere, but we talk about the importance of getting out votes. And Nevada's a great example where we registered this previous election, basically the same amount of votes that got us a climate champion in the Senate. And so it's just kind of smarter, not harder, and knowing where we need to win and trying to inspire through story.
Amazing. I'm reminded of the adage that one should not fear work that has no end, right? Like, these big problems and things that you guys are working on, very well may not be resolved in your lifetime, and yet you have this passionate commitment to them. That's really inspirational. And as I look around the room, we have a lot of people here who are influential in the outdoor space, who have a voice. And I think it's incumbent upon all of us to kind of shoulder the responsibility that change comes in the form of the individual, that we're all more powerful than maybe we allow ourselves to believe. Like, every revolution starts with one person, and you are all examples of, powerful movements in motion. So in our kind of last, it looks like 12 minutes, I swear that thing is ticking faster than I would have thought. Maybe share some advice from the front lines for the people out here who have a really good idea but maybe haven't embarked upon it, for the next revolution and the next coalition.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in real quick, but I think go towards the fear. That's where, when you get that kind of pit in your stomach, that you learn. Someone on the stage today said, be comfortable with the uncomfortable. I mean, that's when now I've done it enough in the mountains and in life, and I find it really interesting that in the mountains, I play a zero mistake game, but it's in society, I've probably lost more sleep thinking about a big decision of, do I start Protect Our Winters, do I start a company, what have you, than I have the night before walking in the mountains that, one mistake could kill me. And so really get to understand your fear, become intimate with it, and understand that that's where life is lived.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk to the women in the room for a second, then I'll find something for you men too. I mean, just kind of dovetailing on that, I came across recently the stat again, which is 94% of women in leadership roles played sports, and it's usually high school and college. And I always thought it was because it's where we learn teamwork and this, that, and the other. And I was fortunate enough to be good enough to play a real sport in high school and then have to walk on to a weird sport that they made Rob Lowe movies about in college. But the reason is that it's where women learn how to lose, and that's what supports the data. And it's the only place that women are allowed to be imperfect or learn it by losing and recovering versus, there's a lot of data around this now around how girls get positive feedback and behaving, and boys are told if you could just sit still, you could get anything done, and that message becomes embedded. And it is one of the most powerful things. I'm raising 3 daughters just in our own house, watching the way, having them and their friends watch professional athletes in a packed stadium, what it does to their dreams. And I always say I never grew up, and I'm sure you never grew up, thinking you could be president of the United States until Trump was elected. I'm like, anyone can be president of the United States. Turns out. But I also grew up, you guys probably both thought you could be professional athletes. I never grew up with that dream. And every boy in America probably thinks they can play baseball, and there's power in those dreams. And so, I think my advice is just take more risk, and it's why this sort of doing something on the side, go towards your fear, take more risk. It's why doing something on the side, I think, is where some of my best work happened historically, because I took my risk profile was really different there than it was where my identity was super wrapped up in it. So, if going towards the fear is not in your personality, it may be hard to do now. So find small pockets of fear to go after and let yourself fail is what I would say. I'd say men pull the women into a room. I'm still shocked by how many extraordinary rooms I got invited to, and my title changed in my last firm, and there weren't that many women with that title, and then how many more I now get into that are far beyond that just because people love sports, and it's like it attracts heads of state and all these different people, and it is one of the reasons I had to leave tech to go do this. It's the first time that like diversity and the way people, in the investor group and in C-suite and stuff like that actually drove revenue, and people believed that they needed women in the room and non-white people in the room because it would drive revenue and enterprise value, and sponsors cared and people cared, and we made a case for that. And so, I mean, I would just say men pull women into more rooms, and then I think the last thing is just make friends with people who are doing cool stuff. Just make a friend. I mean, the story about how I met Natalie is a little bit told in this documentary, but I basically was on stage somewhere really cool and said, we're all in a room with really cool people that a lot of people would die to be in. Go make a new friend with somebody who kind of scares you or who you think might be cool. Give them your number. Go have a meal with them. You don't need to do any business. Just make a new friend, and if they're weird, you can block them. And I went up to one woman named Angela Robinson, who I've since gone skiing with and done some cool things with. And the person who came up to me was Natalie. And she gave me her number, she put it in my phone, and took a 6-month 7 meal. And what we talked about that meal in the last 10 minutes was soccer. We talked about plant-based eating for a long time, too. She's still working on that with me. But anyway, I mean, this all wouldn't, there's so many little butterfly effects, which is why I call my new thing Monarch Collective, but that came out of friendships in this journey. The head of the U.S. Women's National Team, Becca Rue, she's coming to my daughter's bat mitzvah this weekend. Like, all these people are my people and my friends, and so make a new friend, doing something cool is my final bit of tactical advice.
Right on. Very cool. Coffee, advice.
For me, it's simple. It's small. You just got to believe in yourself, put the effort towards it, and understand that whatever arena you step into, you probably are going to get less sleep than what you're getting when you're just thinking about it. And also know that whatever it is that you're thinking about doing, the saying goes, there is somebody else that's probably thinking the same thing, so you want to beat them to the punch, especially if it's a great idea. I'll give you a quick story. On the flip side, I'm into film and TV, and I act. And I'm always going to these different auditions and learning all these different monologues, and either knowing them 8 pages of different monologues and doing it online now because of COVID. So I'm running in Prospect Park, and I'm like, oh man, I want to try to audition for this film, but I don't know who to reach out to. My manager doesn't know because everything is shut down. And I'm running, and every time, I'm a firm believer in telling people that, a simple hello goes a long ways. And I'm running in the park, and I see this older guy, and he's run walking. But every time I saw him, I would say, hey, what's up? Hello, how you doing? And he would say, oh, hey, how you doing? And then we would keep going, and this happened for like months. Turns out, I run, see him again for probably like literally the 10th time, and he asked me for my number. And when he asked me for my number, I'm like, okay, I'm saying hello.
Wasn't Natalie Portman though?
No. I'm like, okay, so I give him my number, and I'm like, okay, that's cool. And I get home and I tell my wife, I'm like, the guy that I keep telling you that I keep, running by, and he run walks, and I run by, and we see each other. She's like, yeah. I was like, yo, today he stopped me, he asked me for my number. And I always manifest that this is one thing that I wanted to be a part of, but didn't know, again, how to be a part of this film. And I run, don't see him no more, run, don't see him no more. And then my phone rings, and it's an 818 number. Now, I live in New York, so I don't answer, I don't answer numbers that the name don't pop up.
There are people in LA who won't answer an 818.
But here's the
My
thing.
heritage, guys, be nice.
Here's the thing, though. The 818 number pops up, and in my head, I'm in the film world. So if you see 818 or 310, something is coming from the entertainment. Like, so I answer the phone, and it's this lady on the other end, and the lady goes, hey, how are you? And I'm like, I'm great. And she was like, yeah, is this Mr. Coffee? And I'm like, yes. And the first thing I was like, oh God, it's a bill collector. And I told her yes. And she's like, yes, well, we would love for you to come in and audition for this role. And I'm looking at my phone, and I'm like, wait, excuse me? And I'm like, she repeats herself. And then I'm like, okay. And she's like, you have management? And I'm like, yes. And she's like, well, can I get your manager's number? And I give it to her. And then I asked, well, what role is this? And it was the film that I was talking about that I wanted to somehow be a part of, because my friend, Michael Kenneth Williams, had just passed away. And he passed away from drugs, unfortunately. And this was a film called I Want to Dance with Somebody, which is Whitney Houston's biopic. And I got the audition, and come to find out, the guy who I saw in the park was the executive producer of that film. So that's why I say, like, take advantage. Like, a lot of people say, how did you get in that? Because that's a huge film, huge deal. And I'm like, I don't know, it was a blessing. but it was that hello that got me there. So if that's ain't a story for you, I don't know what else to tell you.
So, the energy, saying hello, being open. Your turn, Jeremy.
What was the question?
Come on, man. Let's leave people inspired. We got a couple minutes left. We're all going to get out of here in a second. It's all on you, buddy.
Yeah, I mean, I started this round on going towards your fear. Yeah, I mean, and another thing I would just say, life is short, life is now, and yeah, just, bring it. And I try to, every day, just kind of get the most out of every day, and so inspired by the people that I'm around. I guess bringing it back to community, it's just, being around so many people that lift me up on the daily, and I guess just thinking of Protect Our Winners here right now, there's a ton of people that are part of Protect Our Winners, and I think we can't do everything on our own, and it's really critical to collective effort is something that is how I've achieved the success that I've had in all different disciplines that I'm in.
Yeah, thank you for that. I'm sure, yes, applause. I'm sure I'm not alone in really being in touch with gratitude for the ability for us all to congregate after the last couple years of what we've endured. And it's just been an honor and a privilege and a blessing to see so many friends, friendly faces, meeting new people, the ability to be educated and inspired by all the panelists and things that we've all kind of experienced together over the course of the day and last night. And so I guess the best way, in my mind, to close this out is to put it on all of you guys, the audience. Like, I want everybody to really meditate on what they experienced over the last 24 hours, what they can take away from this experience, and then most importantly, translate it into action, whether that's saying hello to somebody and putting a phone number into their phone, or making a phone call, or getting involved in a purple state situation, or whatever the case may be, even if it's small, to leave activated and use that as a foundation to build some momentum around the things that you care about. This is an incredible room of extremely accomplished, talented people. It makes me hopeful for the future, and that's it. It's been a privilege to kind of host this panel, and thanks, everybody. I think we're done for the day, right? Yeah.
We're done.
Thank you.
Done.
Okay.
We're done.
Can't follow that up. As a camp counselor, I have.
That was awesome.
Thanks.
Really fun.
Thank you all.
Yeah.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Kara. Thank you. Woo! Today was a good day. Anybody know the reference? No? Nobody? Okay. I just have to say, what a phenomenal day. It was such a blessing and a privilege to be your camp counselor today. Thank you for inviting me into your homes on the live stream. Thank you in this room for allowing me to be part of your day. But let's give it up for all of our panelists and all of our moderators one more time. I think the one thing that resonated today is that the magic of Strava is through movement and community. You heard it time and time and time again. And for that, we are so appreciative. We told you at the very top of this, it wasn't about us, the brand Strava. It was about everybody in this room, because you are the ones that power us to be better and do better. So I want to thank you for allowing us to be part of your lives every day. Keep uploading. Keep discovering new routes, new journeys. It's much appreciated. Now, I really hope that this is not the end. It's really easy to get in a room and just be excited, like, oh, I saw my favorite person. This was great, it was inspiring. It's what happens after this, right? We brought everybody together, building community. It's about get that phone number, make that connection, link up with somebody, go beyond what happens here today. Because year 3 of Camp Strava, yes, year 3 of Camp Strava is going to be even more exciting, but it starts today. So again, I want to thank each and every single one of you for being here. Thank you for traveling from everywhere. I've had many conversations. I think the furthest person was from Italy. So I just want to shout that. There you are. See, I see you. But thank you. I really appreciate it. And it's not done. There is an after party. Y'all are weak.